Welcome to Daily Armor. Today we're going to be in the book of Proverbs, chapter number 4, and looking at verse number 7. This would be one of those verses that I have this wrote down. I've had it wrote down for a couple of years now, I think. And it's something that when it comes to praying for my husband, who is also my pastor, this is something that I pray for him. This is something I feel like that the Lord has given him a special gift for, but even in that, I am continuing to pray for this. So today in our praying, in our journey of prayer, I want us to be praying for wisdom, and not just praying that we have wise decision, that we know the wise thing to do when we come into a crossroad and we have several choices that we can make, that we know what to do, but that we follow through with doing that one that is right, because that's the hardest part. So praying for wisdom and always making wisdom our final choice. No matter what we want to do, let wisdom be what is that final choice. Those wise decisions should follow suit with those wise actions. And that's not always the case. If you're sitting down in a restaurant and you have all these choices, and say that you are diabetic, and you've got all these choices on the menu that are going to run your blood sugar up. You know the wise choice is to not choose those things that are going to run that blood sugar up. But yet you're not in the mood for that salad, or you're not in the mood for this or that. You want, you're craving that baked potato or that bread or whatever it is that might run your blood sugar up. You are craving it, you are wanting it. So you know what the wise decision is, but we don't always follow suit on it. I mean, that happens in my life all the time, that I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what I need to do. I know what the wise choice is, but I don't always follow those wise choices. And we might be just talking about whether to have a baked potato or whether to order broccoli, but even in those small decisions, they can turn into huge habits that lead us to kind of know what the right thing to do, but not actually follow through with it. And those can have some major consequences in our life. So I want us to look at Proverbs chapter number 4, looking at verse number 7. And we're going to be looking around this chapter a little bit more as well. But I'm wanting us to understand that I'm praying for wisdom, but I'm also praying for the absolute courage and determination to not just know the wise choice, but to do the wise choice. So today we're praying about wisdom. Let's look at Proverbs chapter number 4 and verse number 7. And it says, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get understanding. When I am praying for wisdom for my husband, I am praying that wisdom is the principal thing in his choices. I'm praying for him in when he gets phone calls, when somebody comes and asks him a question, which happens all the time. And he loves people's questions, but he also wants to respond with wisdom. He wants to have some wisdom about him on how he should respond. So that's another reason that this is something that I pray for him. I don't want him to be having a bad day, a rotten day, and then him to speak something that he shouldn't have spoke on. And we're all going to mess up. We're all going to make mistakes. And I know that when I'm praying for him for that he's going to mess up, because I pray that for myself and I mess up. But at the same time, that is my prayer for him, and that's kind of where I want my focus to be on today for all of us, myself including. I'm not just praying that for him, but I am praying that for myself, and how I respond to things. Even like when I am speaking to him about things, I want to have wisdom to know what things should I say, because everything that I think isn't everything that should be coming out of my mouth. Whether I'm speaking to my husband, I'm speaking to my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my church family, strangers, my neighbors, whoever I come in contact with. Just because I think it doesn't mean I should say it. And so we want to pray today that we have wisdom and we handle different situations. We handle different circumstances, and not just, okay, I know I shouldn't say anything, and then so many times we're like, but I'm going to say it anyway. I know I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. I know I shouldn't go ahead, but I'm tired of waiting and I want to do it anyway. So we have those things that we know what to do, and we're praying for the Lord to help us and give us that strength to go or to not go, or to do or to not do, or whatever the case may be, to follow through with that wisdom, to use that wisdom. And I want us to look at wisdom a little bit further. I want you to notice some things about wisdom. I like how, and if you know who wrote the book of Proverbs, you know that it was Solomon. And if you don't know much about Solomon, probably something that you remember about Solomon, besides that he was the king of Israel, he was David's son, that he was the wisest man ever. He had asked for wisdom, and God granted him wisdom, and granted him so much wisdom that his wisdom exceeding the wisdom of everybody else. I believe that his wisdom exceeding the wisdom of everybody else ever. Past, present, and future. I believe he was the wisest man. That's the way it's described in the scriptures, and I'm just thinking he would know everything to do right and wrong. He would know every decision. He would know what the right decision would be. Yet we see that he made some choices for himself that were not so wise. So kind of why that's kind of on my mind today is thinking about Solomon knew all the right answers as far as what choices that he should and shouldn't make. Yet he could give wisdom, he could give counsel, he could give good counsel, he could make good decisions for the country, he could make good decisions for other people, but he wasn't always good at applying them to his own life, to his own personal life. And it ended up costing him a tremendous amount. It cost him. The kingdom was divided after the reign of Solomon. That was because of the punishment that Solomon was bestowed upon him from the Lord for his disobedience. So even though he knew what the right choices were, he went with what the flesh wanted anyway. And that's what I'm praying today is for me. There's some things that the flesh wants. There's some things that I've got my eyes on, and I'm asking God to remove me from that. I don't want to look at that. I want what he wants me to have, but I'm fighting my own flesh to follow suit with that. So let's continue to look at, I like how Solomon describes wisdom. He's speaking to his children. He's trying to teach them some things. He's trying to teach them some things that he didn't actually always apply to himself. And he's went down some roads that maybe he's realizing, or maybe he's living with some consequences that he can't back out from, that he's, now he's done set in motion consequences that are forever going to be following him. And he's trying to share with his children, don't make the same choices that I made. Don't go down those same paths that I went down. But it's so much, we are such a much better example if we live it. And that's a very important statement, because that's kind of where I'm going to end with, about the living it. But I want you to notice how that Solomon describes wisdom. He describes wisdom as a woman. He calls her a she. He refers to her as a her. And if you know anything about Solomon, women is what Solomon had trouble with. I want you to look in the book of 1 Kings. Look in the book of 1 Kings, chapter number 11. I want you to look there real quick. Just back up a little bit in your Bibles to 1 Kings chapter number 11. And I want to look at just verse number 1 and 2. There's a lot more that's said about Solomon's issue, about what problems that he had. In the previous chapters and verses, you're hearing wonderful, wonderful things about Solomon. He had everything going for him. He had everything going for him. Decisions, the neighboring countries, everybody was getting along. People were wanting to come see him. They were wanting to meet him. He was very popular. The Lord granted him great wealth. In addition to the wisdom, he gave him wonderful wealth and just all these things. He was able to build the temple for the Lord and built this beautiful home. He had everything one could ever hope for. But let's look at chapter 11 and verse number just 1 and 2. Let's look at them real quick. And it says, "But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said," this is what the Lord said about it, "Unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love." So Solomon was the wisest man that there has ever been, but he made not so many wise choices for himself. He knew how to apply it to the kingdom. He knew how to apply it when he dealt with neighboring countries. He knew how to apply it, in others' lives whenever people would bring things before him. If you look if we look back in chapter number, I believe it's chapter number 3. Let's flip back there real quick in 1 Kings chapter number 3. And you'll notice, who would have known how to have handled this situation? And this is showing us that God had absolutely give him wisdom and wisdom in abundance. If you look at chapter number 3 and go down to verse number 9, and it says, this is when he is asking for wisdom. It says, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" He's saying, when somebody comes to me and I need to make a decision, I need to discern what's the right answer, what's the wrong answer. He's asking for the Lord to give him wisdom. He ultimately wants to, that back in Proverbs 4:7, he wants wisdom to be the principal thing. Here in chapter number 3, if you look down in verse number 16, it says, "Then came there 2 women that were harlots, and unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day that after I was delivered, that the woman was delivered also, and they were together." So you've got 2 women in the same home having babies that are just days apart. "There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house." So it's got you, what you have is it's her word against her word. So you've got 2 women, and they're going to be telling the same story, and Solomon is going to have to decide who is telling the truth, because there's no witness. There's nobody that can speak up and say, well, I was there and this is what I saw. There's none of that. There's no way to tell which one's lying and which one's telling the truth. But God has given Solomon such wisdom that he figures out a way to tell which one's lying. And he says, or they continue, and it says, verse number 18, "And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house." Verse 19, "And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it." So she had laid on it and smothered it to death. She fell asleep on her child, "and she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom." So what they're saying is, the one is saying that this woman took my child and gave me her dead child. She switched babies in the middle of the night. She switched babies when she realized that she smothered. Now, he doesn't know which one's telling the truth. There's no way for me or you to know which one's telling the truth. We can't look at somebody and say, well, you look like you're lying. We have no idea. You can't go by what somebody looks like. You can't go by what's on the outside. You absolutely have no way to know how to decide between what's right and what's wrong. Who's telling the lie? Who's telling the truth? But God gives Solomon such wisdom that he figures out a way. It says that in verse number 21, "And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear." She's looking at this child and saying, this is not my child. This is not my child. Something has happened. The other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. They're saying, this is my, they're both claiming that the living child, they're both claiming that it to be their own. And neither one will fess up to who's lying and who's telling the truth. So here we've got where God absolutely, after Solomon has just recently asked for wisdom, this is what he does. Then said the king, the one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king says, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king says, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. The true mother was not going to let before her eyes her very own child be divided in half. She would be willing to give it up as to see it be divided in half with a sword, to see it to be killed. God gave Solomon wisdom to answer that way. Solomon, looking at this situation, he had no way to know, but God gave him a wise counsel, a wise decision to make to let him know what the truth was. And when put to the test, the true mother was not going to stand right there and watch her son be divided. But that mother that was mourning, that mother that was crushed, that mother that was dealing with anger and anguish, she was willing for that woman, the other woman's child, to be divided and killed so that neither one of them should have a living child, because she was angry, she was upset, she was bitter, she was broken. And she was willing for that woman's child to be dead as well. So God gave him such wisdom. But then you flip over and in chapter number 11 and verse 1 and 2, and you see there's a but. But King Solomon loved many strange women. He was following the flesh. So now, when we're looking at Proverbs chapter 4, and he's looking, he's teaching a lesson to his sons, and he's sharing with them that wisdom is always the best choice, and he's treating wisdom as a woman. He's referring to wisdom as a her, as a she. I think that gives us a little bit of light to that he wished that he would have cherished wisdom as a cherished woman, as a cherished wife, as somebody that he would just adore and never to look away from, always to be holding her, always to be cherishing her, that he wished that he would have treated wisdom as a faithful wife, and being faithful to his wife. And then the things that she would have brought to the relationship if he had followed that. So he's teaching his children that wisdom is like a cherished woman of virtue, and don't stray from her. And this is how you treat her. So let's look again now, in light of all that, let's look again now at Proverbs chapter number 4. And I want to back up. To verse number 5. And it says, get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not. So you don't want to forget wisdom, neither decline from the words of my mouth. He's saying, don't look away, don't turn a deaf ear, don't let it go in one way and out the other. This is very important. I think this is Solomon, knowing his whole life would have been so different had he pursued wisdom as that cherished, precious, faithful woman. And he had been faithful to her. Because look here at what it says. Verse number 6, it says, forsake her not. This is talking about be faithful to wisdom. Forsake her not. Cherish her. Don't turn away. Don't look at any other strange women. Don't look away, but cherish her and be faithful unto her no matter what is out there, no matter what's before you. No matter what choices that you have, all these things on the menu that and anything is, you can have anything on the menu. Forsake her not. It says, forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory she shall deliver to thee. Listen to the words of Solomon talking about wisdom as if she's this beautiful woman that can just bring him such joy and happiness and contentment, because that's what she can do. Wisdom is that is precious, and that should be exalted above everything, above anyone. The wisdom should be cherished. And so we look here, I want you to notice some things that are said. In verse number 6, it says, forsake her not. And then it says also to love her. Now look down in verse number 8, it says exalt her and embrace her. Verse number 13, take on down to verse number 13, it says, let her not go, keep her. So it's all these beautiful, beautiful statements. This sounds like Solomon's talking about his wife, about this precious woman in his life, and he's talking about wisdom. And wisdom is as if he would wish that he would have treated her this way. And he's telling his sons this, he's explaining this to his children, that if you will treat her, and he's also telling them what she's going to give back to the relationship. So this is how we should treat wisdom. Now let's see how she's going to give back to the relationship, because it is a relationship. When we are speaking about wisdom and those choices, not only of that knowing what to do, but choosing and doing those right things. So let's look at what she gives back to the relationship. It says, let me go back here to verse number 6. And she shall preserve thee. She shall preserve thee. If you look at the end of verse number 6, she shall keep thee. And then we go down to verse number 8. It says, she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her. She shall give thee, verse number 9, she shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall she deliver unto thee. Doesn't that sound like a beautiful relationship? Like a beautiful working together? And you're gonna exalt her, you're gonna love her, you're gonna keep her, and she's gonna give back. When we, not only do we make those right choices, not only do we know what the wise choices are, but we make those right choices. This is what wisdom is going to give back to us. It's going to be so much better than any fleshly decision that we ever could think of, that is only going to last for a moment. These are things that are going to last. These are things that is going to bring your life joy and contentment, and it's going to be wonderful what she gives back to the relationship. I want you to notice all these things, and I want you to look here at the end. I want you to look at verse number 13. Take fast hold of instruction. Let her not go. Keep her, for she is thy life. For she is thy life. This is that life that is that state of living. She is how you should live. She is what you should be doing in your life. This is what your life should be made up of. It should be made of not just knowing some wise choices, but acting on wise choices. And then she's going to be bringing so much to the relationship. Now, if you go against those wise choices, there is some consequences. And there also, well, I guess I should just say it this way. In verse number 10, it says, hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in right paths. When thou goest, thy steps shall not be straitened. That straightened is not like that straight path. That straightened is not, your steps won't be hindered. So what it's saying, what Solomon is telling his sons, if you follow after wisdom, if you love her, cherish her, exalt her, she's going to give all these things back to you, and it's going to give you a long life. It's going to give you a unhindered path. You're gonna have, there's going to be trouble, but you're going to be able to get through it. God's going to provide, and you're going to get through it. And when thou runnest, thou shalt not stumble. So when you're running after some things, if you're making those, not just knowing those right choices, but making those right choices, you're not going to stumble and fall by the wayside. And you're going to keep going, and you're going to be making an impact, and you're going to be making a difference, and you're going to be living a life that is going to bring so much into it, because you have chosen to love her, to exalt her. And we're talking about wisdom. And when we're as women, and we're looking at that wisdom, and we're wanting to exalt her, we're wanting to cherish her just as well. Not just for the men in our life, not just for our husbands, our pastors, our leaders, but we want to be that wise woman that not just knows the right choices, but actually makes those right choices. And we want to set good examples for other women, for other ladies. We want to be a good example, and we want to lift her up, not ourselves, but wisdom, that wise choices, and they come from God. When we go back to that 1 Kings chapter number 3, and you're looking there in that scenario, we could never say that that God wasn't part of that. We have to acknowledge that he was part of that was all about him, giving that special wisdom of giving him that knowledge to know how to handle that situation. And when we as women come into so many different circumstances, when we're leaning a ear, and we're listening to somebody, and they're sharing maybe a problem, maybe a concern, maybe a heartbreak, a heartache, and we want to have wisdom to know sometimes we just need to be a good listener. Sometimes we don't need to say anything at all. We just need to be wise and listen and turn them to the Lord, because that's who knows exactly what the wise decisions are and what those wise paths are. And sometimes they're the hard things, because we go against what the flesh wants. Sometimes we want to step in. Sometimes we want to go what the flesh wants. Sometimes we want that baked potato and don't want that salad. Sometimes we want to make those choices, but we're asking God to give us wisdom, not just to know what the right thing is to do. And there's definitely a lot of freedom in at least knowing what the right choices are. Sometimes I've made decisions and I just didn't know that it was wrong. But when you come to that crossroads and you're like, oh, that's wrong. When you open up that menu and you've got all these choices, you're like, okay, that I shouldn't get that. That says it's 1,200 calories. That one says it's 1,600 calories. I shouldn't get that. So when you're looking at those choices and you can see some obvious things that are not wise, but it's seeing, okay, well, this one, this is not going to, hinder my health, and this is going to be good for me, and it's going to taste good, but it's going to be good for me. But the flesh is like, man, wouldn't that baked potato be good, or wouldn't those French fries taste good about right now? Helping us not just to know what the right choices are, but then to follow through and make those right choices and be that godly example to others, because ultimately wisdom is going to shine everything back on our Lord Jesus Christ, everything back on God the Father, because in his wisdom, he is letting us know what those good and those bad choices are, and he's letting us in on some things, and he's telling us you're going to have a long, healthy life, and you're going to be prosperous, and maybe not in finance, but you're going to be prosperous in those lives that you affect, and those lives that can be changed because you're choosing to cherish wisdom as a precious jewel, as a precious gem that you would never want to lose. You would never want to take your eyes off of it. You would keep it safe and secure. So today, our prayer is to be wise, not just to know it, but to act on it as well. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.